Hello, everyone. So we just had an impromptu networking session. Wanted to get you guys talking while we work through to getting to Thaddeus, who is here. Hi, Rita. So we are excited to have Thaddeus here to talk about Standard for Success and the reporting tool. And I'm actually going to turn it over to him so he can go ahead and take it away.
Hey everyone, can you hear me okay? People in the back? I am Thaddeus Winsek. I am in the Office of Business Transformation, Grants Management, and Oversight Division. My office is responsible for the Grant Solutions infrastructure tool and more importantly for you guys for this session, Grants Solutions OLDC, online data collection. I am today going to talk to you about more broadly standards for success. This is the reporting requirements for your Ross grants. I'm going to first want to get the slides going and just going to give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. Generally, I want to first give you the idea of what this is all about. Why are we going with this approach? Why is this needed? Why is this type of reporting necessary for your work, for what we at HUD need to do for you and your constituents? And then I want to go into the resources that you'll have available for you, who to speak to when you have problems or questions. And then finally, I want to delve into the actual default HUD-free or cost-free data collection reporting tool, that's Grant Solutions. That's what I believe most of you will be using. There are a few other options, which I'll get into later on. But we'll kind of go through the nuts and bolts, kind of get you familiar with what you'll actually be doing on a day-to-day basis, and again, give you sort of resources and areas or avenues to go when you get stuck or you just have questions or want clarification on things. So first, could you guys get the slides up real quick? So I'll just get started. I basically just have a couple slides to kind of give you just the overview of my presentation. But so essentially, Standards for Success, it kind of was born from OMB regulation in 2014. 2 CFR 200 was one of the major sort of regulations that came out, and it was basically articulating and stressing the importance of data collection and reporting from more of an outcome focused and from a service recipient focus. So in the past, I think Ross is one of these programs, but there were several others that used the eLogic model. That was sort of the department's former enterprise-wide approach for data collection. It was originally intended for most, if not all, of the discretionary grant programs. Discretionary grant programs meaning competitively funded programs. And it served its purpose to a certain extent, but it eventually, through sort of trying to manipulate it to make it fit all the different programs, it lost its potency. It basically allowed anyone to collect anything. So even within a particular program, different grantees or funding recipients were collecting completely different things. And if you can imagine from our standpoint, that really tells us nothing. It might be able, at the very least, you might be able to see improvement within your particular grant over a 3-year period or whatever time frame you're looking at. But from our standpoint, being able to judge a program on the whole, being able to prove the worth of this funding for the service, for the recipients that receive these services, and what I'm going to get to eventually is this is all really to basically give better justifications to Congress why we fund these programs, why the money is important, what we're achieving, and why really what we want to say is why this stuff needs to be further funded, given more backing and support. So when we started developing this tool and this reporting approach in 2015, thereabouts, we wanted it to be, of course, encompassing the discretionary grant programs, and being flexible to accommodate them all. However, we wanted them to also be able to serve the program communities as they're needed. And so what we sort of came up with, what basically ended up being the case through our process was we first did a deep dive of all the programs, what they collected, what they were collecting but really didn't need, what they were collecting that was important, and then what they may not have been collecting that they would like to collect to further their interests and what they were achieving. So we did that over about a course of a year with several contractor-supported teams. We had that sort of that giant repository of what we call data elements, but sort of like the lowest level of questions that we could gather. And from there, we did then a big sort of one-off, you want to call them discussions or group meetings with the different program offices saying, okay, this is what we've collected on the whole for the department. What is applicable to your programs? And what ended up happening was we standardized the data elements so that things that were very similar, such as definitions of homelessness, unemployment, those of that matter, we came up with one definition, and then we said as a program, which ones are applicable to you, and that way, you as a program can be able to collect the information and prove what you're achieving for your communities, but at the same time, we can then show Congress or other agencies what we're achieving and how it compares to other agencies, other programs, of course, other regions and things of that nature. So it gives us a much more powerful approach. Going in further, what we did was we had like sort of three tenets of this. The first tenet was, and this goes back to that OMB regulation, is to focus on outcomes instead of just focusing on activities or sort of like the whole idea of reporting for reporting. Hey, part of this grant award is we got to collect information, so on the back end, let's just put down the numbers that we think is roughly the best, and we'll go from there. What we wanted to do is have this data drive performance. We want it so when we have outcomes out there for the grantees, it's something to strive for, and it's something to, again, prove the worth of the program. So when we collect whatever data elements are collected for your program, it's directly supposed to lead and go into these program outcomes that are specified in your NOFA award or your notice of funding availability or your actual award, your terms and conditions. It's supposed to be almost like a cascading direct line going up to those high-level priorities and goals down to those data elements that you collect on a more routine basis. So again, number one, it's supposed to be outcome-based, not just sort of activity-based, although we are still collecting those. Second, basically that cascading up and down of aligning what you're collecting at the bottom, it goes all the way up to the top. And then the third sort of tenet is record-level reports, and that might be like the most radical shift for maybe some of you that haven't collected this in the past. So most programs, I should say many programs at HUD, and I think for us as well, the old approach was more or less aggregate data. You may have served 100 people, 200 people, but HUD, all we wanted was just what was the number of widgets you did. We don't have any sort of ability to see how change occurred over time for individuals. We had no idea to tell if people were making progress, if people were actually finding better outcomes or better solutions through the funding we provided. So it was just an aggregate report. That was fine maybe 10, 20 years ago. But the regulation of 2 CFR 200 was basically that is not sufficient. It's not going to give us really any real telltale sign of the successes we're making or the achievements that we're having. So the record level data is probably the most important aspect of this. When you're collecting your data, and I'll show in the tool in a little bit, you're essentially creating like a report for each individual. We call it record level, like individual level, and we on our level could make an aggregate report. We would just combine however we would need to all the individual reports that you submit at the end of a reporting period. We could make that aggregate report. But what gives us the most power is that we can actually show how individuals are being affected by the work you guys do. And I think it's going to show that this isn't just throwing money at problems or just trying to, make make staff roll call. It's actually making significant work and changes in communities. And one key piece to that is, and it probably dawned on you, is okay, we're dealing with personally identifiable information, PII. So what I'll get into again when I go into the tool is do not submit any personally identifiable information. There's only probably 2 ways you could do that, which we're going to actually most likely prevent in next reporting cycle. But essentially, when you do the person identifier code and the household identifier code, it's more or less up to you to provide which nomenclature you'd want to use. But do not put in someone's name. Don't put in their address. You just need to make something that is not linkable to that person. But I'll show you in a moment. So first, let me go into resources, and I'm going to start going into the actual website that is available to you all if you haven't visited it yet. And if you don't have it, obviously you want to bookmark it. But if you just Google search, and you can share my screen now on my laptop if you can. If you go to HUD Exchange, Standards for Success, that'll usually bring it up real quick. So this is sort of your one-stop shop resource for your reporting requirements for Standards for Success. This first opening part, it shows you, which programs are included for this year, fiscal 19. It gives you those tenants that I described. I'll just keep kind of going further so we can get into the tool. It gives you your key dates. One thing to keep in mind, you guys are new grantees, and most of you, your reporting period will be whenever your period of performance starts. So if it started, I think, forgive me, I don't know if it's March 15th or something along that lines. That's when your first reporting period starts. Thereafter, it's always going to follow the federal fiscal year of October 1st to September 30th. And then unless you hear otherwise from your program, you always have 30 days to submit your report at October 30th. That's the standard rule. When you go into Grant Solutions and Form, it'll always have those dates. There's no way for us, at least at this time, to change those default dates. So just keep that in mind. If you see that this reporting period, it says October 1st, you're not responsible for anything until your period of performance starts. So just keep that in mind. Reporting tools are down here. I'm going to get back to that in just one second. So here's an important link is under contacts. And I'll have this on my slides as well. But so you don't need to write this down right away. We'll share it to you on the slides. These are sort of your key points of contact. So the first one, if you have general questions regarding Standards for Success, just how to, I'll just leave it at that. General questions, you can go to askgmo@hud.gov. That's askgmo@hud.gov. And by the way, if you're after all this, if you're like, I don't know which one to go to, when in doubt, go to Ask GMO. I'm one of the people that man that inbox, and if I'm not the right person to answer it, I'll get you the right person. So Ask GMO is one at HUD.gov. That's one key place. The next one is the Grant Solutions Help Desk. So if you're going to be using Grant Solutions and Form, that's definitely a key place to go. Their email is help@grantsolutions.gov, and they have two telephone numbers to call. Next, if your organization uses either Ask Online or Family Metrics, if you're already sort of a member, already use their tool, we have a link for their help desk. It's support@pangeafoundation.org. If you don't know what Ask Online is or Family Metrics, don't worry about it. It's another sort of case management system that is aligned with Standards for Success, but the cost-free HUD-provided tool is Grant Solutions and Form, and you're totally covered with that one. You don't have to go to any other tool. And then lastly, if it's more program-specific questions, it is not stated specifically here, but go to your ROS inbox or your ROS program contacts. They'll help you with any ROS-specific questions. So we'll share this with you later. And again, if you're ever in doubt where to go, you can always go to askgmo@hud.gov, and we'll get you the right people. So I'm going to go back to this homepage real briefly. These are the training materials and resources. We have a manual. We have FAQs. We have all sorts of other walkthroughs. Just one thing here, you can explore this on your own. I just want to give you a brief glimpse. This is we call it the PRL. It's a participant record level report or participant record level information. This is sort of like a master document from the HUD standpoint of all those data elements that we've compiled from all the programs. However, if you'll see on this far right column, only some of the data elements are applicable to you as a Ross grantee. So you don't necessarily have to go to this document, but I just wanted to show it to you as to how this whole sort of framework looks like. And you would have to, again, it has everything here, so some of these data elements won't apply to you. In your Grants Solutions Inform tool, when we go to the actual form that you'll be using, it will have only the data elements that are applicable to you. So you don't need to worry, like, is this applicable or not? Yes, on the Grant Solutions tool, it is. So let me get out of here quick because I want to save enough time for everything we want to cover. And yeah, I definitely encourage you to explore this website. One thing that I definitely think everyone who uses Grant Solutions Inform should go to is if you go under trainings, there's this Inform walkthrough orientation. It's about, I think it's 55 minutes. It's pretty much going to be what I'm going to go over with you guys in about 5 minutes, but much more in depth. They have basically every single sort of step that you need to take, whether it be from saving your data to submitting your data to unsubmitting your data, validating, all those sorts of things. I'll do my best to show that in a nutshell how to do that right now, but it'll be the most comprehensive sort of walkthrough to go over. So it'd be under recordings. Please have a look at that. Let me get back to the home page. And back to these reporting tools in the bottom. So there's Grant Solutions Inform. If you click on this guy, it'll give you the Grant Solutions webpage. It'll give you the Grant Solutions Inform user account request form. This is if you'll already have people set up to access your Grant Solutions account. This form is for if you want any additional users. The best way to describe the tool, if it makes a little more sense for you, is for every grant, there's an account set up. That's sort of like it's a standalone account for your grant. The users or the usernames, they get access to that account. You can have as many people as you want to have access to it. You as a user could have access to more than one grant account. So if you say, hey, I need such and such person needs access, just tell us who the person is, their email address, and then tell us the grant to link that username to. Sometimes in the past, it shouldn't be the case, but in the past you might get a username and it's not linked to your correct grant, so you'd basically just tell the help desk it's not linked to the correct account, that sort of thing. Real briefly, there's links to Ask Online, as well as Family Metrics. And again, if you're interested, you can go on those web pages, you can seek them out. There's a fee associated with using those tools and for being members. I won't spend time with that. Finally, this is not, again, critical, I think, for you all, but if your organization uses another case management system, your organization wants to continue using that case management system, you're more than welcome to do so. We have the capability set up in Grant Solutions Inform whereby your system just needs to create or render a XML or Excel file. Whoever your technical people are for that tool are, they should be able to handle that for you. There's a quick sheet for them that you'd probably just share with them. And if they're going to use Excel file upload, there's these specific templates, and the same goes with XML. There's specific templates that they have to basically follow or align where each row and each column just has to match what the tool will accept. Again, I don't think this is super applicable to you guys, but again, if your organization is going that route, this is where you should look. And if you have any questions or your team on your side has any questions, reach out to our help desk. We'll guide you through it. We've had a handful do it last year. We expect to have more people doing it in the years to come. So don't feel that you have to use Grant Solutions if you don't want to. Although all the information will eventually go to the same database in Grant Solutions. All right, let me get started just briefly to do a walkthrough of the Grant Solutions tool. And this is, we were trying to use a demo site for you guys so I could like show some dummy data and those types of things, but considering you all haven't really done any reporting yet, you guys are new grantees, I'll probably just use one of your all's accounts, as an example with nothing on it, and then I'll delete it. There's no harm, no foul with that. So, just if it's your account, don't fret. Nothing is going to be used against you, so to speak. We'll delete it. So let me put in my username and password. And again, if you haven't gotten access yet, that's what you get. You get a username, you get a password. So this is the general login page. The best way to describe how the Grant Solutions tool kind of fits in, Grant Solutions is like this entire, I called it infrastructure, but it's like this entire online software suite, and these different modules comprise underneath Grant Solutions. So the Grants Management Module, or GMM, that's how your grant was awarded, and that's one of the modules. And so then when we have all that information from your award, we transfer that information over to the Grants Inform or OLDC tool, so then we create your grant accounts that way. Then once we have your grant accounts, whomever we already had from the GMM, we'll create the user accounts for OLDC. So for instance, if the only person you had in the GMM was your approving official, that's the only person who would have access to Inform at the moment. And so if you're someone who needs to access the tool and you don't have it, you would just fill out that user request form, send it over to the help desk. You could also send it over to Ask GMO and we'll forward it for you, and you get access. It's pretty straightforward. So once you get in that general environment or suite, you should have access to OLDC, and I'm clicking this icon on the top. And so there's sort of like two different sort of like formats this could look like. There's the regular homepage and there's the enhanced. I have it on the enhanced. Essentially on this left-hand side are the key sorts of links you're gonna need. What's here in the center, when you start using the tool more, that might make more sense because you'll have work that you've already started and you can kind of go back to it much more quickly. But here on the left are the key links you're gonna want to be looking at. Specifically, the report form entry. So when you first get started, this is where you would click to start reporting. And then, again, most of you guys, whatever username you have, you're probably going to be linked to only this grant. So when I go through this, you should only have one option pretty much for everything. And this is your first reporting period, so you should only have one option for everything. I'm using my own account as a HUD user, which is a little bit different. So I have access to all the different programs that are using this right now, but I'm just going to go to Ross. And then, I'll make sure I get a new grant. So is Phoenix Residential Investment Development Effort, if you're in here, is that okay? Okay, there shouldn't be anything on it. So, and again, if I unsuccessfully delete whatever we did, we can get it straightened out. All right, so yeah, this looks good. All right, so if you have never done this before, you've never reported before, these are the only two actions you should have. There's this cloning report, which only makes sense next year. The clone report, just very briefly, when you do your first submission for this first reporting period, you'll be able to clone that data in the next year, so you don't have to really do all that duplicative grunt work of repeating whatever status they had at the end of last reporting period. It'll carry over, and then you can just make changes that occur for that reporting period. But we're going to pick this reporting period, which is the bottom one, which again was from October 2018 to September 2019. And again, you're just responsible for the start of your period of performance. So I click on Create. Okay, and so this gets to this report section, and here, there's like a ribbon up here on the top. This kind of tells you where you are. We just came from the form selection where you first access, and now we're in the report section. So over here, you have these two rows, and it's going to always be like this when you first start. The cover page, that's essentially your organizational information. I'm going to go there first, and essentially, it should have everything from that grants management module when you were awarded. So it should have, and I'll just go to it now. It should have your grant name, it should have your DUNS number. It does say edit section because there's a few places where you can change things. But essentially, if these pieces of information are incorrect or need to be updated, just let us know, and we can get the Grant Solutions team to update it. So, it has the Phoenix Residential Investment Development Effort. That's the resident organization, their address, DUNS number, so on and so forth. Again, just look it over, make sure that it's all correct or anything needs to be added. I think the two things that you'll actually be changing is for number 10, you could add any attachments that you may need. If your program needs you to add attachments or anything like that, that's where you would do it. But that's in a program-specific case. I'm not sure if you needed that. And the other thing is you'll be certifying your report here. I'll get that in just a second. So anyway, you review that just when the first time you go in, make sure it looks good. Okay, it looks good. Next, we're going to go to the next section. And the next section is going to be the actual, we call it a PRL, the participant record level report. And again, this is going to be the report for each person. And so this is basically the form that you'll fill out for each person over the course of the reporting period. Let me go back to just show you what I'm actually doing. So I'm going to go back to that report section page where I had the cover sheet or cover page and that first report. So each row, excluding the cover page, each row is a report. And as you create reports, you're going to have more rows, or sections as they call it. So right now we only have one blank report. So if you come from the cover page, just go to the next section. But here I'm going to click Create Section. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to click Edit Section. Create Section is to make another report. So we're going to fill this blank form just to show you guys how this works. Okay, so again, this is that PRL, this participant record level report. Okay, I'm going to try to do this quickly so I can just show you how to validate and everything. So the way this works is from the system side, you must complete everything on this form in order to eventually validate, certify, and submit your data. That's from a system standpoint. On a program standpoint, you're not going to necessarily have to ask all these questions, or you're not necessarily going to have to know all this information. So as we go through, you'll notice that most or many of these response categories, you can have not applicable or information not collected. And from a system standpoint, that's totally fine. You just need to, fill out each field. So from our standpoint, we know that you actually addressed everything. From your program standpoint, you know the way you're supposed to operate your grant. If you're reaching out to someone and it's specific about, let's say, employment, then you're probably going to get that information. You may not know about their health or other background information, and I'll defer to the program office, but essentially, you don't need to feel required to fill that out or to get that information. Do what's appropriate for your award, for your grant, for your program. So with that being said, household identifier and person identifier, just to, again, reiterate, this is where you can put in anything as long as there's no personally identifiable information. My suggestion is for household identifier, just put the letter H for household and then put whatever number you want. For person identifier, my suggestion would be a P for person and then put whatever number you want. The person identifier, there will only be one person identifier per person. For the household identifier is unique. I should put it this way. For every person that's within a household, they share that household identifier, and there should be no other duplication of that household identifier. So each person has a household identifier, and if you're let's say mother, son under one household, you share that household identifier. But other than that, the household identifier should be unique. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email at AskGMO. Age, intake date, participant status code. This is one other one I just want to delve into real quick. This is sort of more in program, a little bit more in program territory that I think Trey may have already discussed. But from the system side, the key difference with participant and non-participant is for most people that you're collecting data on, it's going to be a participant. These are people that are basically enrolled in your program, receiving services that you're engaged with and so on. But if they're a participant, you have to fill out all those fields. If they're a non-participant, which there should be a small fraction of your reports being non-participants, these are people that are not really enrolled in your program, that are not really receiving services. You may have gotten their information through some informal exchange or through maybe some information sharing. But what that does in the system is you'll be able to validate and submit that information without having to actually fill out every field. And that's just a way for us to be able to still get some information from these folks that are eligible to receive services but aren't actually enrolled or receiving services. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I'm going to try to rapid fire respond to everything. And what's going to happen is you're going to be probably filling this out over the course of your reporting period. And that should make it a little bit more straightforward when it comes to submission time because you've already put in all the work. And then after this first reporting period, it should be much less burden, much simpler because you just carry over your data through that cloning option for the next year. So for the first time, it might seem like a lot, but it should be much easier to come. Let me just do this really quick, and I'm not reading anything right now. I just want to get all the information in here. As you can see, a lot of these have individual does not know, individual refused, information not collected. I just need to fill all these fields so I can show you how to validate and submit and so forth. One of the key features of this is that if you make a mistake, the system will check it. So obviously, if you miss something, the system is going to prevent you from validating. And it'll specifically state where you need to actually fill that out. So let me see if I can do this within a short time. I know we're obviously going through this really quickly. Again, this is all laid out in that walkthrough that I mentioned. When it comes to specific data elements, that like what is this applicable? How does this report? That's probably more a program-specific question, but you can always reach out to us at the AskGMO inbox. We also like feedback. That's also helpful. This is our third year we're doing this. We've made changes every single year. And it's based off of what you guys tell us, so.
I'll save Thaddeus while he's trying to figure that out. So some questions that I know you may have, but want to bring some clarity to. So that Ross data guide that I was talking about prior to, so you saw that he had the reference manual for the data elements, which gives descriptions, but then the Ross data guide goes a step further because the reference manual that he was showing has basically all of the data elements that are applicable to all Ross grantees. The Ross data guide goes a step further to say, if you're working on specific areas of need, then what will be required for you. So just want to point that out. And how are we doing?
I'll leave one blank. All right, so I think I just rapid fire just for demonstration purposes. I filled in all the fields except one. And so whenever you're obviously just, good protocol is you always save your information, save your work. So I'm going to first save. And this is saving that that report, that row that you have. So you can always, so again, the way I suggest going through this is as you collect this information, you just put your information in as you go throughout the reporting period. And then once the reporting period's over, you probably just have to maybe do some last minute stuff, but it should be pretty much already completed. All right, so this is probably when your reporting period is completed. You're going to be saving throughout the reporting period. After September 30th, when the reporting period closes, that's when you're going to review your data, make sure everything's up to date as of September 30th, and then you're going to click validate. And that's basically making sure that everything you put in is correct. I just click validate, and I should expect at least one error right now. Let's see. Try again. Now let me see if I go back to report section. Essentially what will happen if this is not showing me, so it's validated, I guess I did it correctly. Did I miss something? Essentially, if you miss something, it typically says error message for, let's say, number 42. If I didn't click anything, it'll typically, oh, did I pick non-participant by any chance? Oh, that's my fault. I'm sorry. So, all right. So click participant for an actual enrolled person. Now these data rules should have an effect. So I thought 88, I didn't select anything. Let me validate now. Okay, perfect. So, okay, I have quite a few errors. So I'm missing values for these ones. Let's see, question, intake date. Here, Joe, you want to maybe answer some FAQs? I'm going to just fill this out so I can go to validation.
Yep, so you can basically see for those, and wanted to also discuss participants and non-participants. So the Ross Data Guide says that participants are those that receive intake assessments. So for example, let's say you go to a community event or you put on a job fair. Not everyone at that job fair may be considered a Ross participant because you didn't do an intake assessment. But you may have a sign-in sheet that will have some general information that you can collect, and those are people that did get some sort of service or some sort of coordination through your program, and you can track them and put their information in here and select them as a non-participant. But then you have those that you're working one-on-one with, that you've done that assessment with, and those will be considered participants. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
Okay. All right, so I think I did it correctly this time. Oh, all right, one more missing value, age. All right, I missed age. So put in age. All right, I should have everything squared away with validation. Click validate. Okay, perfect. No more errors. It's successfully validated. So once I'm here, again, this is in September, after September 30th, I have all my reports. I create all my reports or sections for all my people. Let's say I serve 50 people or 100 people. They're all going to be validated based off of what I just did. And then I'm going to go to the cover page. And this is where I would, actually, this is probably going to be your approving official. They're going to review your work or whatever your business process is. They would electronically sign here. So they're kind of like officially stamping it for the organization that all this information is indeed true and correct. And we can undo this, so don't worry from your account standpoint. Once you certify, once that's squared away, you'd finally submit your data. And we're running short of time, but essentially, when you submit your data, that's obviously like it states, but so long as the HUD side hasn't actually accepted it in the system, you could take it out. So let's say October 15th, you submit your data, you realize you forgot something. Most likely, the Ross office isn't going to actually accept it until after October 30th deadline. So you could take it back in the system. You could then uncertify, unvalidate, then you could submit more information, create a new report, then you'd validate, recertify, resubmit. That's the general process: save, validate, certify, and submit. That's the gist of it. I could go in more details. If you have any questions after this conference or this convening, you can go to those references that I have. You can put it back on the slides when you get a chance. There's the contact information that we have on the webpage, and yeah, we'll help you through it. You guys are all new, so we don't expect you guys to be experts. And check out that walkthrough as well. But it's more user friendly than you may think, and yeah, we'll help you through it.
So I know there's some questions. So if you can make your way to the microphones, and I think I heard a question that was about to come out, which is, who is your authorized official? And your authorized official will be the ones that were identified as the authorized representative on your application. Typically, they are either your supervisors or your executive directors.
So on the long spreadsheet that you download, can you just upload that, or do you have to use the online data system?
You're talking about like when I talked about that participant record level report. So that's just on like basically a PDF. That's showing all that information in that form. So it's saying, this is the question, these are the response options, but it's all integrated in that form. So unless you have another case management system, you're going to be using the Grant Solutions and Form tool.
Okay, but if we're using the Excel, we can just upload the Excel. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, so technically, so that would be actually the actual questions. When you're doing an upload, you're going to be using those templates that I showed you briefly. Those templates will guide your systems administrators to just make sure that like the cells and columns line up to what the system will take. But yeah.
Okay. My next question is, and we're new, and so I've been looking for this all over, is your records management system. You've got all these questions that deal with, medical issues, jobs, and numbers and things like that. Is there any HUD guidance on a records management on, like how you manage your records? Like what is an acceptable, you've got, what do you call it, for medical?
HIPAA?
HIPAA. And I can't find anything, even anywhere, on how your files in your office are required to be kept. So if they have HIPAA or, like Social Security safeguards, anything like that.
I'll say a couple things. One is, as I mentioned before, HUD, from our standpoint, we're not collecting any personally identifiable information, so we're not collecting any Social Security numbers, nothing that could link to a person. That's the first thing just to keep in mind. Secondly, when it comes to the actual information that we're collecting, it's all per program statute and program guidance. So one thing I was kind of alluding to is if you're interacting with an individual and they're dealing with employment, it's probably not appropriate for you to be asking them any medical questions. It must be more, again, this is more on the program territory, but it must be more or less applicable to the services that you're going to be referring them to or something that they've sort of, initiated. Lastly, how we work the actual data collection is we have a online data repository that is managed by the department through the HHS shared service agreement that Grant Solutions operates under, and that's the general infrastructure framework of information. That's kind of like the broad sort of points I can answer your question with.
I want to add to that 2 CFR part, was it 964 part 200, does talk about managing records, and that talks about how those records are supposed to look. But I also want to make note that specifically with health, because a grantee, I'm actually going to point them out, was Denver Housing Authority, came to us, some time ago with concern about certain medical questions that we ask. But if you look at the required medical questions, they're just asking if they have health coverage, how are medical examinations. It's not asking necessarily what is their disability, what is, those type of personal questions. That's not required of you.
But for substance abuse, you're asking about treatment, and that is HIPAA.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration.
May.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted, this is a lot of information in a short period of time. Is it possible maybe like in September to have a webinar?
Yes.
Okay,
And we'll also send out the webinar we did in May. But we'll look into doing another webinar
okay,
as well.
that would be great.
Yeah.
Hi, do we report once per year per client or per service per client?
Once per year per client.
Thanks.
Hello?
But I
Oh,
will
sorry.
also add that, say, for example, you're maybe meeting with that client over and over and over a year again, you may want to go into you may not be certifying and validating their report and sending that forward, but you do want to go on and update their files, at least in the tool or whatever you're collecting through, so that when you're going through that season where you're uploading your reports, that you're not feeling overwhelmed. I would encourage that, yeah.
Hello, I have 3 questions. The first one is, for the non-participant residents, we don't need to include them in our report, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no requirement for that. Unless you guys have something more specific to that.
I would recommend that many of you guys are doing community-wide events, and you don't want to not count those that, in your developments, that you are doing some sort of workaround, but it may not be someone that you're working one-on-one with. And so I keep bringing up the example of a job fair. You may have a job fair, you may have a farmer's market, you may have something that's very community-wide, you're not sitting down one-on-one with. They can be considered a non-participant because you're not necessarily meeting with them one-on-one, but you are providing some general services through whatever community event that you're doing. I would say you would want to count them so HUD knows that, yeah, I'm working with these folks one-on-one, but I also have these other folks that I'm touching, and I would imagine your caseload or case management may be 50 people, but the non-participants could be hundreds of people, and that's just because of how many people you're touching.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. That would be, from our standpoint of research and trying to prove what we're doing and the value and the need, that's very helpful for us, absolutely. So if you can provide information, please do, because if you're only able to serve so many people in your residence or in your purview and you just don't have the capacity, we would love to prove that, look, if we could have more funding dollars, more service coordinators or things of that nature, it would be great. So.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, are we allowed to start submitting residence information the whole month of October until the due date?
So whenever your period of performance starts, again, I think it might have been March or so, that's when you should, from that point on, is when you should be recording your information for this reporting period. So was it March 15th?
It's March 18th until September 30th.
Yep.
You're reporting, that's what your year 1 report will look like. You'll be collecting data from that point on. So anyone you worked with and whatever services they received, you'll be reporting on that from March 18th through September 30th for the year 1 report. Then from there, from October 1st until September 30th will be your year 2 report. And
But I've been collecting my data, but I haven't put it in the system. So should I be putting it already?
I would say to do it, and how many folks would say, go ahead and do it because it may be tedious at the last minute? Start now. Start now because you want to see that come October, my emails and Thaddeus' emails go crazy. And I'm going to Colombia in October.
Okay.
And I think it's right around the submission
Have
date.
fun over there. All right. And last question. Is there any possibility that the report for the elderly will be separated from the family? Because 88 questions is a lot, when for the elderly it's only like 15 questions to answer.
Well, I'll say a number of things. One is, unless there's more guidance on your program side, only put in the information that you have, you know? So again, if you've only interacted with an individual based off an employment, then that may be the only information you need, along with maybe demographic information and things of that nature. The rest, you'll just put in NAs or information not collected. I mean, I'll be very blunt. The first year, that's where you're gonna have the heaviest load. Thereafter, it should be a breeze. All the information is carried over. You're just gonna be making the tweaks and changes based off a person's status change and things of that nature. Yeah, that's pretty much what I want to say.
Hi. My question is, on the form itself, when you have to go, when you're putting in multiple residents at the same time,
Yeah.
you have to go to the All tab all the time. Is there a way to bring things up faster?
So when you're saying you want to go from one report to the next, or?
Well, I have like 450 people, and I might be sitting down and entering 50 people
Oh, I see.
at different things, and it's a pain in the butt when you save the report and you validate. It takes you back, and then you have to go to that all button. There's not an all button down the bottom, there's an all button up the top, and then you have to find the number to input the number. Is there a faster way to do that?
So I'm literally asking you because we can probably make this enhancement. So you'd like to have a button on the bottom of the form
Yeah.
to be able to go to the
Or
next.
a way to bring up the next number faster, to
Okay.
input and bring up the next number
You
faster.
can, there is a bottom at the end of the form where it says next section that would bring you to the next person. So that's one option.
No,
Yeah.
they're not all in order. You're entering them as, they're not like in alphabetical order or anything like that. You're
Right.
entering as, I might work with Joe Schmo, and next week I'll
Okay.
work with Billy Sue or something.
Could you, I think I see what you're saying. Could you send me an email articulating this again? And I think we can make a system enhancement, frankly,
Okay.
so,
Thank you.
sure.
Look at that.
Okay, mine may be somewhat of a follow-up because I'm kind of identifying exactly what she's saying for the caseload. So every time we go into the Grant Solutions platform, we create the number for the household, a generic number. Then we also create a number for the character. So I have a twofold. When we're creating all of these household generic numbers, when we have to go back into the Grant Solutions platform, there'll be a drop-down menu where we'll have to identify what that number is attached to that household, correct?
Yeah, so when you're creating a new report for a new person,
Right.
you create that unique identifier for the person.
Right.
And then for the household, if this is the first person for a household, then you just create a new one. If it's a new person in a household you've already reported on, then you have to put in that household number.
Okay, so then we're going to be notating hypothetically or realistically, we'll have to notate their ID number in the Grant Solutions into their case management file, so because there's no names attached.
Yeah, so what you'll want to do on your end is have a key of some sort that the person identifier and the household identifier is then on your end, again, matched with the actual person's name. Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to the family of the household. For every time that I have an engagement with the family for this particular household, each child, teenager, or spouse will have a number attached to this head of household character number, correct?
So,
So follow me here where I'm going. When I have each member in the household attached to the household initial number, am I going to modify that with the A, B, C, or D for each person in the household?
So it's on an individual level. So when something's affecting a person, that's when you make that change for that individual report. So if you're saying that you'll have an interaction with a family, and forgive me because I'm not super familiar with Ross, but you have an interaction with a family, and through that interaction, it affects maybe 3 of the people in the household. And
Yes.
So as of now, you would have to go in each report and make the change for each person.
Okay, so I have a head of household with one character number, and then I'm going to create another character number for all 4 of her children. So each 4 of those children are going to have a different number.
Do they have to collect information on children?
So your children, each person or individual that you work with will have a personal identifier and code. The household code, so for example, someone lives in Unit A, that everyone in Unit A, if it's 4 people, will have the same household identifier, but they will have 4 different personal identifiers.
Got you. So again, I'm going to have to notate each one of those children in the household with the ID number, because when I go back, when I provide a service for the parent, more than likely the adult is coming to me asking me for services. So I'm providing them hypothetically with BART cards, Clipper cards, Walmart, Target, whatever, and each one of those children that I'm providing a service for has a different ID number. So when I go back into the grant solutions, if you can follow me,
I get
I
what
have
you're
to
saying.
make sure that I attach the correct number for that child that I'm providing a service for.
Yes, and so I think you have to be a bit strategic about how you're doing. If you're working with households that have different personal identifier information, no, we're saying random, but maybe that personal if the household is, as he was saying, H-A 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Maybe you want the P to be then P-A 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, and keep going from there. So you can then identify. But
Who
this
I'm
also means in
attaching
your
it to.
own tracking systems that you can look to see and how you're coding each person. So when you go into the Inform tool or whatever case management software you're using, that you're matching those
Numbers,
identifiers together.
Okay, so followed up with that then, so just for clarity for myself, when I go back in there for the year 1 of the grant, when I go back in there, every time I go back into that particular individual's folder or file or character number, I'm going to increase that. I've said I saw them previously once, but I'm going back in there and I'm going to change that engagement activity to number 2 now. Okay, you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm going in there a second time and a third time. So every time I go back in there, I'm changing that number to increase it by 1.
Well, or
I'm
that
looking
engagement, So there's a data element called like service coordination. If this individual has received service coordination,
Yes.
and it may ask, I think it asks a number of times. So yes, you'll increase that. So anything through that engagement that changes, you will then change yourself. But if there's something that did not change,
I won't
there won't be
change
any changes, and the response is already there because. And so the only thing I would just recommend in those instances, I think anytime you go in and change something, change the data collection date, because then that's when you then revise the report for that individual.
Okay, and I'm going to walk away after this last question because I know I have a list. Is this program, are we focusing on the age base? Because when there are new children in the household, is there a period where they might be from 0 to 12 months that we don't have to indicate that we provided a service to them?
Right. So I mean, you're not going to do. So they'll be considered a non-participant.
Okay.
Because you're not doing intake assessments. If anybody can do an intake assessment for a child, because the child will have to answer that, meaning 0 to 2 years old.
Right.
You're amazing. But in those instances, they'll be considered a non-participant because they're not doing an intake assessment.
Okay, thank you so much. That
Yep.
helped.
Great question.
This also doesn't directly answer your question, but I just want to say we are working to make some enhancements to the system that will automate the person identifier and the household identifier, whereby when you create a new report, the person identifier would automatically be created or auto-generated, and then the household identifier, you'd have a list of household identifiers that you've already inputted in the system that you could select from. So we're trying to make it a little more user-friendly. And then the other aspect, which let me know if this would be helpful, is if when you do a service interaction with a parent and you'd want the same sort of change to occur in the rest of the individual in the household, I don't know if that's what you'd want, but if that were to be something that would be helpful to reduce going into every single report, we could work on something like that. So if you want to make it a family-wide change, we could most likely do that with the household identifier being the common link.
And we're going to do.
Okay.
Whoa, spirit filled. And we could do one more question.
I was just more like a suggestion if you could do head of household, like maybe instead of like having all of them, if it's a family, we can just like search by head of household and then we can just go in there, which would make it a lot easier than
looking
Okay,
through.
yeah, and that seems pretty simple. Could you also email that to the Ask GMO, just so I can have it as a record?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
So I think one thing to note is that we're not, with this, not only are we trying to inform you, what a great play on words, inform you of the tools that you can use for reporting, but it's also for you to inform us of what enhancements we can make, and I think that should be evident today. And I hope that this kind of lifted a chip off of someone's shoulder today, to know that maybe it's not as tough as I thought it is going to be, and maybe it's more tedious than it is tough to really get the work into the tool. With that, I'm going to start wrapping up so folks can take flights, or if you're staying in town, you can enjoy the wonderful capital of the United States of America. So one thing that Charles and Chad is passing around is a list of all those that are field office directors. So if you do not know who your field office director is, you can contact these folks to let them know who you are, what grantee you have, and I also recommend when you email them, putting your grant number so they know or what housing authority you are as well, or representing. And especially if you're a nonprofit organization or a resident association, I think it's really important for you to notify your field office, because generally we have relationships with those that are public housing authorities, so that they know who you are. And Charles did promise that everyone before they leave will have this contact list. Another thing that will be going around is the evaluations for the conference. So we want to hear your thoughts, and we hope that before you leave, you can fill out that evaluation. Colleen, is it on the table already? So if you haven't seen those evaluations, they are going around. Great. Did everyone receive either evaluations or the contact list? Great. Great. So everyone has a contact list and a evaluation. So you guys can use that. Please do fill out your evaluations. We would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. So this is just the beginning, and I hope that this conference, or convening rather, allows you to jumpstart the many great grants that you guys have, and all the wonderful tools that we discussed today can be put into action and really be a start for you to implement the great programs. Does anyone feel motivated? Okay. Does anyone feel stressed out? All right, well, this is really just a jump start, and it's a goal of ours to make sure that we continue to not only enhance your programs through things like this, such as this convening, but also to do webinars and to provide resources to you guys so you guys can carry out the work that you do. So this is something that we're looking to continue to do, and if you have been a part of our Ross mailing list, you'll see that we've over time tried to do some webinars in the last year or so, and this is something that we want to continue to do so that you guys are equipped and ready to move residents towards self-sufficiency. So any call, I know a lot of folks ask, Trey, can I have your email address? I promise you, even Charles already knows this because he does not email my actual email address. The Ross mailbox is something that I look at first, and in fact, I looked at it the entire time we've been here for questions that have come in. And how many folks have had a one-on-one call with me and their field office person? Right? And when you reached out to me, did I say I can't do it? Exactly. And I did it within a week or so. And so I just want to encourage you guys that don't be afraid to reach out to the Ross mailbox and say, hey, I would like to have a call. The person that I was trying to also get to raise their hand, I think that Charles is talking to the whole table. So I'll ask again. How many people have reached out to the Ross mailbox and received a phone call and they said, I need to have a one-on-one. I need you to, raise them high so people can see. I want to encourage folks to make sure that and one of them even got a site visit out of that, right? And so make sure that you guys reach out when you feeling overwhelmed or you're trying to figure things out, reach out to the Ross mailbox and say, hey, I want to have that one-on-one and talk through a program. I want to talk through those admin issues or training or travel. And as well as your field office, you guys now have those contact. And often when we do those one-on-one calls, the field office is always involved in those calls and the ONAP office. So I'm actually don't have much more to say. I think folks have to get back on flights, but I hope that you guys enjoyed yourself. If we have not met or talked one-on-one, I would love to do that. We're going to send out the presentations. That is day 1. Went out yesterday to the Ross mailing list, and if you guys haven't not noticed, we're trying to promote the Ross mailing list by having you guys sign up so we can send out everything. So send out that Ross mailing, sign up for the Ross mailing list. If you haven't already, we'll send out day 2 shortly after this. I also wanted to make mention Miss Wimberly from Oakland, California has 4 tickets to the African American Museum for tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And she has 2 left. So for 11 o'clock and she has 3 left. So if you would like to go and you're in town, not on HUD dollars, you can go and see and get those tickets from her. So everyone, please travel safely. And if you would like on the sign-in sheet, I think you shared if you would like your information shared, and I think everyone asked or said they were okay with that information being shared. So we're going to send out the list of all of those that attended and the contact information so you guys can network as well. All righty?